A message, a promise from God's word, which will encourage us not only this month, every time, every part of our life. This message will encourage us. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time you have given us. We thank you, Lord, for the fountain of tears against mountain of fierce fasting prayer. Lord, what sustains us during our tears, what sustains us when we face a mountain of problems in front of us is your word. So even as we go to your word to meditate on a promise that you gave your servant David, I pray that you will speak to us, O Lord. He was called as a man after your own heart, and you gave him some of the most wonderful promises that we ever have printed in our Bibles. As we, Lord, understand why you gave him such a wonderful promise, I pray that you will speak to us in a practical way, in a powerful way, in a life transforming way. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Let's turn our Bibles to 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 14 and 15, which I believe has one of the most eloquent, powerful promises ever printed in the Holy Bible. 2 Samuel 7, 14 and 15.
I will be his father and he will be my son.
I will be his father and he will be my son.
If he
If he sins,
sins, I will correct and discipline him with
I
the
will
rod,
correct and discipline with him.
with
Okay,
the rod,
with a rod,
like any father would do.
like any father would do.
But my favor will not be taken from him,
But
as
my favor will not be taken from him,
as I took it from Saul,
as I took it from Saul,
for whom I removed from your sight.
for whom I removed from your sight. Here is a God's unconditional promise to David. It's a glowing promise. It's a very different, like the promise, the nuptial agreement which Catherine Zeta-jones made with Michael Douglas before marrying him. In fact, there's a clause there: if Douglas is unfaithful to her, she gets so much of his property, so much of his money, blah blah blah. It's there in black and white. That's not an unconditional promise. It's a conditional promise. But this is an unconditional promise. It says here, I want to read it again. 2 Samuel 7, 14 and 15. I will be to him a father. I'm sure when David heard those words from God, his heart missed a beat, because there was a time when his own father forgot that he had a son. Do you remember that? When Samuel came to his house and asked him, okay, where are your sons? And then uh, David's father Jesse had all the sons lined up before him except David. His own father forgot that he had a son called David. Maybe he thought, I plan to have seven sons, perfect number, God's number, perfect number. David was the eighth son, unplanned birth, unplanned son. So sometimes he forgot that David even existed. But God says that that guy was, who was forgotten by his own father, I will be to you a father. I will be to you a father. And then he also says, he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, I will discipline him. Now, I know some of you have noticed that I speak against hyper grace doctrine wherever I get an opportunity. And here is one verse which talks against hyper grace. When we sin, what does God do? He doesn't proclaim to us, you are the righteousness of God. He disciplines us. So now are we called to proclaim we are the righteousness of God when we sin. When we sin, the Bible is very clear. We have to get down on our knees, ask God for forgiveness. And that's not the time to say I am the righteousness of God. Because God himself says, I will discipline him. It's not that God is, finished with us. As long as on this side of eternity, even a million times we go back to God asking forgiveness, we can never exhaust his grace. But we need to go. We need to humble ourselves. Okay, so David, and I will discipline him, and he says, I will build you a house, a glowing promise, a gorgeous, glowing promise. Now, why did David get this promise from God? It's actually, if I want to summarize this promise, it's a father promise. I will be a father to you, and it's a forever promise. it's a father promise. I'll be to you a father, and you will. What does he say? I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. That means I will rule Israel through you forever. So it's a forever promise. It's a father promise. How? Okay, I think the solution is there in this, just in this name, David. Okay, David. Okay, I'm just going to use this acronym to see some inspiring things from David's life, so that we can also make this promise ours. Now, I'm not saying okay, if we do this, then we'll get this from God. No, I'm not being very simplistic like that. But I believe David lived a life which inspires us, and God was gracious to David, and he gave him this promise. It's not like we copy David and we get all this promise. It's not as simple as that. God gave it to him graciously, and but the same thing, God gives us grace so that we will also, inspired by the grace, we'll lift our living to that standard. Inspired by the grace of God. Okay. Now D, daring David. Like if David was part of the Chennai Super Kings, and if it was a super over, if a super over, the scores are tied and there's going to be a super over, David would be the guy who will walk up to Dhoni and say, "Give me the ball, I'll bowl the super over," because he is daring David. Daring David. Now he wanted to meet Goliath, and Goliath was a guy who scared everybody, and including his own elder brothers. So David was available to God. He was the goalkeeper turned giant slayer. Goalkeeper turned giant slayer. Now, if you read 1 Samuel 17:28, David had an elder brother called Eliab, Eliab, and David suspected, Eliab had a suspicion about David. You know what he suspected? You read 1 Samuel 17:28. I'm glad for the Sunday school teachers here, so they know the story of David and Goliath more than me. But it's a powerful story. Not just not just for Sunday school. Throughout your life, David's story inspires. Okay. 1 Samuel 17:28. David's elder brother to David.
When David's oldest brother,
Oldest brother. Okay. Eldest brother. Okay.
heard David talking to the men,
Okay.
he was angry.
He was angry. Why was he angry?
What are you doing around here anyway?
What are you doing around here anyway?
He demanded.
He demanded.
What about those few sheep you are supposed to be taking care of?
Okay.
I know about your pride and deceit.
I know about your pride and deceit.
You just want to see the battle.
You just want to see the battle. I want to tell you, Eliab was absolutely mistaken. He accuses David of wanting to be a spectator. But he was not speaking to a spectator, he was speaking to a soldier. David was actually a soldier. He's not the guy who will watch things happen. He's the guy who will make things happen. He's a proactive guy. That's why he inspires. He didn't come to watch the battle. In fact, he came to fight the battle. And that's what his elder brother accuses him of wrongly. Okay. Now verse 16, when we read 1 Samuel 17, verse 16, for 40 days, twice a day, the voice of David, the voice of Goliath was unchallenged. He says, come, give me a man. That's what he said. Give me a man to fight with me. 40 days they hear the voice, and his voice of Goliath is unchallenged. I think God calls us to, God is calling us to the story of David and Goliath to get proactively involved in things and challenge people. I remember once I heard I was watching Headlines Today, and there was a guy called Zaka Jacob working for Headlines Today. So he actually was talking about, he actually wrote an article and then was talking about this as well, promoting homosexuality. I remember going to India Today website, because Headlines Today is owned by India Today, and responding to Zaka Jacob. Now, small things like this, we can do to challenge the established voices which speak against God. We should not be a spectator. We need to be soldiers. Now, others ran away from Goliath, but what does David do? Look at verse 24 of 1 Samuel 17. As soon as the Israelites saw him, they began to run away in fright. Others ran away from Goliath. David ran into Goliath. Okay, David ran towards Goliath. David ran towards Goliath. Verse 47. You see verse 47. 1 Samuel 17 verse 4. As David moved closer to attack, as Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. All right. Okay, so he was a daring David. He was a daring David. And secondly, he was the aligning David. Aligning David. Which means David was a man after God's own heart. David got these wonderful promises. One reason perhaps is that here was a man whom wanted to align his life in line with God's word and will. Aligning David. For example, after he committed those torrid sins, after he had an affair with Bathsheba, after he tried to cover it up, after he tried to cover up the pregnancy, and after when Nathan came and pointed out his sin, and all that happened, verse 12, 1 Samuel chapter 12, David is praying so much for the love child that was born. Bathsheba became pregnant, and David was praying that the child that is in Bathsheba's womb, conceived as a result of an act of his adultery with her, should live. But look at verse 14, 1 Samuel 12 verse 14.
Now if you fear and worship the Lord and
Okay.
listen to his voice,
Yes.
and if you do not
Sorry, 2 Samuel 12 14. Sorry. 2 Samuel 12 14. 2 Samuel 12 14.
but you have been the enemies of the Lord, great opportunity to despise and blaspheme him,
Yes.
for your child will die.
Okay, your child will die. Who says this to David? Nathan. So God says your child will die. And so David begged for God to spare the child. He went without food. He was fasting. He lay all night on bare ground. Verse 15 says he was fasting on soup and he was fasting on sleep. Okay, he did not sleep in his regular bed. He was fasting on soup. He was fasting on sleep. And verse 19, okay, he hears whispers and they say that, and the news comes to David that the child whose life he was praying for is now dead. Now what does David do?
Yes.
Verse 20. Now these are some reasons why David was a man after God's own heart.
Then
David got up, okay,
washed himself,
put on lotions, put on his his deo and all that, okay,
and changed his clothes,
and changed his clothes, got onto his best clothes, okay, designer wear, okay,
and worshipped the
and
Lord.
he worshipped the Lord. Why? What is this? What is that saying? God, I wanted you to spare this child, but if you in your wisdom wanted to kill that child, I salute your sovereignty. I salute your sovereignty. I accept this. Now we can say that, Lord, okay, some of us might have said, Lord, I am 29 now. I want to get married this year. But 29 is over 30. Now learn to salute God. Learn to salute God sovereign, because his plans are always better than your plans for yourself. And that's why here is a man constantly aligning his life in line with God's word and God's will. Now, this is something amazing about David. Something amazing about David. So it also speaks about his humility, which means my God is wiser than me. I am not so wise. It's humility. That's why in Psalm 34:6, it's a powerful prayer. If you read it in the traditional version, King James version or ESV, this is what David says. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him. Who's the poor man?
David.
He's not really, he's a rich guy. He's the king of the land. But he says, when he comes before God, he's a poor man. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him. So when he prayed not as a prince. How will a prince pray? Bring this, bring that, bring my chapel, bring my, prince will have people to do everything for him except wash his bum. For everything else, prince has people to do things. But no, David was not a homosexual. Okay, we won't come into that. Though there are some people who try to say that David is a homosexual, talking about his relationship with Jonathan, but David was not a homosexual. Okay, now David prayed as a poor man. He pleaded with God. He pleaded with God. Once in 2 Samuel 7:18, David use these words. 2 Samuel 7:18. Who am I? What is my family that you have brought me thus far? It's not like I deserve it. If I am in this position, I deserve it. Not like that. It doesn't say that. He was a shepherd boy. He was going behind sheep. in Tamil, the phrase "Adugalin Pinne Sena Davide Natai Alumbadi Agavaita," which means in Tamil it comes driving when the guy was going behind goats, now becomes the prince of the land. Now he doesn't say I deserve it. He says, who am I? What is my family that you have brought me thus far? And if you read 2 Samuel 7:18 to 29, 2 Samuel 7:18 to 29, 8 times David uses the phrase, "Oh Lord God, oh Lord God." Here is a man who is greatly intimate with God, greatly intimate with God. So that's why he, repeatedly you'll see, 1 Samuel 23:2. Should we attack the Philistines who are at Keilah stealing grain? God said yes. Okay, his men opposed his move, but David again asked God, should I attack the Philistines? Often you will see in his life that he asked God for directions. I don't know which way to go, God, but you direct me. Which means here is a man who is aligning himself with God's will. Okay, then DAV, V-turn taking David. Okay, we have heard of U-turns, but in U-turns there is a slight curve. Have you seen a curve in the U? Okay, which means you're on the curve a little more long. But if you take a V-turn, you don't stay on the curve so much. V-turn is almost like a reverse direction. V-turn is almost like a reverse. So David was a V-turn taker. We have heard of U-turns, but David took a V-turn. He never returned to the same sins again. The shape of, yes, David committed adultery. There was a slow slide to adultery. First, if you read 2 Samuel 3, God said kings should not multiply wives. He multiplied wives. Then if you go back 1 Samuel 25, he's fighting with his wife, who was very upset that he was without clothes. He was dancing with some women. Okay, no problem. He can dance. He can worship God. But I'm sure his wife had a point. Though God punished her, God punished her. She became pregnant. She was barren. All that is true. But I'm sure his wife had a valid reason to be concerned that her husband was dancing without clothes, with a woman who was not without clothes, without a stop. Naked. It says naked. Or maybe he had his underwear on. I don't know. I wasn't there. We don't have a YouTube video about it. This is what I like about my wife. She always challenges my Bible interpretations. Okay, whatever it is. Okay, he was naked, or he was half naked, or he was quarter naked. What we don't know. Okay, but his wife was concerned. Here was a husband was dancing with some women. So he had a fight with his wife in 1 Samuel 25. He multiplied women in 2 Samuel 3, and by 2 Samuel 11, he committed adultery. His slide to sin was slow. But after, then he tried to hide his sin. Psalm 32 perhaps talks about it, how he, God was working on his conscience, and his heart was, there was almost like a rumbling inside his heart, but he covered his sin until Nathan came, maybe after a few months or a few years, I don't know. Yeah, Nathan is here. Okay, Nathan came and narrated to him the mutton biryani story. Okay, it's a good time to talk about mutton biryani when we are fasting from morning. Okay, we're fasting from morning. It's good time to hear about mutton biryani. Okay, he gave the mutton biryani, how the mutton biryani was prepared. Okay, one man wanted to prepare mutton biryani. He had a sheep in his house, a goat in his house, but instead of going for the goat in his house, he went to the neighbor's house. Okay, he had many sheep in his house, in fact. But he went to the neighbor's house who they had only one sheep, one goat. It was like a daughter to that neighbor. He grabbed that goat from the neighbor and made mutton biryani out of it. Okay, and then David then David got very angry. He said, "I'm going to kill that man who snatched that daughter-like goat." And then Nathan slipped out his hands and said, "You are the man." At that moment, David did not repent. Till that moment, David was going. He was like a Usain Bolt, sprinting away from God. But at that point, when Nathan said, "You are the man," he took a V-turn. You can read his life again and again. He never returned back to the sin of adultery. He never returned back to the sin of adultery. And the transformation was so complete that the man who killed his soldier's wife, the man who killed his soldier's wife so that he can have sex with her so that he can marry that soldier's wife, would not now drink the water which his soldiers got by risking their life. You remember 2 Samuel 24? Soldiers got him some water and they risked their life to get it. He said, if you guys have risked your life to get this water, I won't touch. He touched the woman before, but now you won't even touch the water which soldiers got by risking their lives. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So we need to, that's something. Why am I opposed to hyper grace? Hyper grace, I believe, encourage young people to stay in sin. But the Bible nowhere through edict and through example encourages us to leave sin with the power of God, by the grace of God, to leave sin. Take a V-turn away from sin. Okay, inert seeming David. D-A-V-I. Inert seeming David. Now David had this rare quality of being inert. He could swallow all the trash thrown on his face. For example, when there was a guy who called in 2 Samuel 16, who called David, "You murderer." You call David, "You murderer." But you know what David did? He was a common guy. I mean, he was an unknown. He was not a big king or prince, but a common guy who walks down the road. He looked at David and said, "You murderer." But David said, if God had asked him to speak these words against me, who am I? Which means when people threw angry words at him, he learned to be inert. He learned to, not inert, meaning inside he was boiling. Inside he was, that's why I said inert. Yeah, okay, that was just one-off incident, but a lot of people who threw stones against. But why do I say inert? Why do I say inert? Inert is, inside he was boiling, but outside he was actually able to speak gracious words. No, but that is not hypocritical. That is the first step to getting over your bitterness. That is not hypocritical. That's the first step to get over bitterness. And some of us don't even make the first step. And we want to sleep with a pillow of bitterness all our life. We want to hug it close and sleep all our life with that pillow of bitterness. Okay, now David was bitter inside. Psalm 35 verse 8, this is what he wishes would happen to his enemies. Let them fall into the trap they set for me. Psalm 35 verse 8, David prays, let them fall into a trap they set for me. Psalm 58 verse 6, God break their teeth. What he prays? God break their teeth. Psalm 109 verse 10, Lord, let their kids, and sometimes we think, okay, father is bad, but the kid is innocent, so he'll spare the children. But David doesn't spare children also. Let their kids wander as beggars. That's what he prayed. So these are prayers he prayed not before them, but he's just expressing his anger before God. Now, how many of us are honest in our prayers? We go to God, we can actually, we are taught that we should erupt before people. Okay, Shah Rukh Khan lost his temper when some of the guards in an IPL stadium pulled his daughter's friend's hand or something. His daughter's friend's hand, Suhana's friend's hand. So Shah Rukh Khan erupted like a volcano. So, and doesn't feel sorry about it. What about me, you mean? Okay, that we'll talk about later. Okay, see, here is a man who, you have not listened to me pray, right? When I pray alone, if you listen to me, then I was not praying alone. Okay, now, so here was a man, because he spent time with God praying and allowing these emotions, raw emotions, he shared them with God. When he's able to love even his enemies. Now, what am I saying? If you go to God's presence and spend time in prayer, and you're natural in your prayer, and you just tell God what you feel like exactly. When you meet that person again, you're able to love that person. Okay. For example, let's say I get mad with my wife, and I shout at her. Chances are next time I see her, my anger would have reduced a little bit. Why? I've already shouted at her. So what am I saying? Don't shout at people. Express your emotions before God. Then when you get to people, He'll give you the grace to be inert And not only not graduate to say gracious words. If God gave him, God asked that fellow, his name is Shammai. If God asked Shammai to call me a murderer, why should I, and oppose that? That's what David did. Okay, so inert David, and then D, D-A-V-I-D, debt paying back David. Debt paying back David. David was a man after God's own heart because he paid back the debt he owed people. First, he paid back God. And not you can never really pay back God. You can only express your gratitude towards Him. But you know how David paid back God? He wrote love songs for his God. He wrote love songs. He wrote so many poems. Some of those poems are so amazing. It says one Psalm 63, I think he says, my body longs for you. This is body longed for Bathsheba one day. But he says, now my body longs for you. As Psalms, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It's become the most famous psalm in the whole world. And then he was so desperate for God. He said, Psalm 27 verse 4 is another psalm, another great love poem he wrote. The one thing I want. What one thing you want? Sometimes one thing we want is an acid test of where our heart is. One thing I want is go to America. One thing I want to go is marry this tall, dark, handsome guy. One thing I want is to, get a 6-figure salary. One thing I want is to, just preach in a stadium full of people. All these things we can have. Okay, one thing. What is the one thing we want? He said, just to dwell in your presence, just to look at your face. So here was a man who gave back to God by writing psalms which still speak. And 4 times, the Bible, in the book of First Samuel, the Bible says the Lord was with David. The Lord was with David. God's presence, he loved God's presence. And he paid back to people as well. There was a guy called Aruna. Okay, we have an Aruna here. But the spelling is different. Araunah. This guy gave him his threshing floor to build an altar to stop a plague that came upon the people because of the another sin that David committed, a sin of counting the people. But you know what? David insisted that he's going to pay Aruna for the threshing field that he gave. He said, I will not offer to God anything that it did not cost me. He paid back Jonathan by taking care of his son who was a cripple, man called Mephibosheth, and that became a parable for grace down the centuries. Mephibosheth, a guy is a cripple, he can't walk, but he sat with David, and David took care of him as his own son. And we are crippled by sin, crippled by curse. When we come to the Son of David, Jesus Christ, he accepts us just as we are. And Mephibosheth became the illustration for grace. And a man called Barzillai took care of him when he was on the run. And David told Barzillai, come stay with me. You helped me when I was in run from Absalom. David was not a guy who forgets favors. He said,
Solomon also.
Yeah, you.
Sons of Barzillai.
Okay.
Take care of them.
Not that Barzillai. This is Barzillai who gave honey, oat, and a lot of nuts and all these good food, healthy food to David when he was on the run. That's different. That's different. That's different. But David, the thing is, see, yes, towards his death, David wanted his son to end one of the guys who spoke against him and make sure that he had a bloody death.
That is Shimei.
Okay.
Even Barzillai's son,
Okay.
show my favor and kindness to Barzillai.
Okay.
And then their sons.
My wife knows the scriptures more than me. I'm glad. Okay, I forgot. Now, but some of us are concerned that he asked the sons of Shammai to be killed. That's the truth. That's the beauty of the Bible. Except Jesus, nobody is perfect. That's why there's 2 such stories are there. Except Jesus, nobody is perfect. So, but that doesn't mean we don't look at the other lives of other people. David is a glowing inspiration. It's a glowing inspiration every day for me that I should not be a spectator, but be a soldier. And for inspiration for so many things. So shall we just close our eyes and ask God to bless these words for us? Some of you are thinking, I am fatherless. God says, I'll be a father to you. Some of you are Some of you have never heard. Some of you wish, and I know some of you literally wish, what if a guy will come to me and say, I will be your man, and a guy of your dreams, for better or worse, till death do us part, until the ocean stop touching the sand, I will be your man. God says those same words to you right now. He's making an eternal covenant with you. The God who made an eternal covenant with David is making an eternal covenant with you through his word. He's making an eternal covenant with you. Doesn't mean he'll excuse your sin. When you sin, he will discipline you as long as you are committed to coming back to him. David received that promise, and here was a man who was daring, who took a V-turn, who was aligning his life in line with God's word, who was a grateful man, who always wanted to repay back what he got from God and even from the people. He inspires us today. None of us here are fatherless, and all of us here have a forever promise from God. Forever promise. Diamonds are forever? I don't think so. God's promises are forever. God's promises are forever.